What's up, guys? John here, back with another one for you. This one I want to talk about the upcoming Upwork IPO, which I hadn't heard about until just today. So I wanted to talk about that and what it's going to mean for freelancers. The future of Upwork is, Upwork going to go by the wayside and become another one of the freelancing site has-beens, or is it going to be able to grow and become something even bigger and better? And what is this IPO exactly going to mean for you as a freelancer over on Upwork? So I want to dive into that. I want to start off by going through the actual announcement. This was posted over on Recode, who seems to be the first ones to have found this out, because Upwork actually did this confidentially. They didn't make a big to-do about it. So let me read through this real quick to give you some context. So these are kind of the important parts of the article. So one of the more prominent startups in the so-called gig economy, Upwork, has confidentially filed for its initial public offering, Recode has learned. That means you can expect Upwork to become a public company in the next few months, according to people familiar with the matter, unless the startup gets pulls back its plans or gets acquired. And this was posted over there about 30 days ago. So when they say in the next few months, we're sort of coming up on when that may start to happen. Upwork makes its money by taking a cut of the cash paid to the freelancer. The company hasn't disclosed any revenue figures, but it has flirted with $1 billion valuation in the past. Of course, that was slashed by one of its own investors. So that's maybe not exactly what it's valued at. So this is poised to be a marquee IPO of the second half of 2018. Upwork's led by CEO Stefan Casriel did not respond to requests for comment. The company is the product of a 2013 merger between two prior similar companies, Elance and Odesk. Okay, so this is a big deal. I mean, these IPOs and things like this can sort of change the way a company works and so forth. And you start adding in, a lot of times it's accompanied by management and changes in ownership and culture and this, that, and the other. And so these can have some different effects. So I want to quickly go through some of the pros and cons that have seen people talking about when it comes to this, just to give you some full context, and then I'll tell you what I think of all of this. So one of the pros is it could be increased growth for the entire industry. So the exposure from this IPO and Upwork now being a public traded company and people learning about them through investing in stock and so forth could lead to an increased exposure for the entire industry, which could potentially cause more people to want to hire freelancers and get things done for them that way instead of hiring full-time employees and so forth, and could just lead to increased growth overall. And it goes back to that saying, rising tides swell all ships. So that would be good for you if you're over on Upwork or if you're on any one of the freelancing companies. Another one I've seen is it could raise more capital to increase growth. That's usually the point of these, is to raise capital to get more money. And you hope that money then gets reinvested, and it's not just a payday for the investors and the people who founded the company and any of the employees or whoever who have stock options, and they all just sort of check out after the IPO. Hopefully, you sort of hope that's not the case, but there's certainly that potential there. But one of the potential pros is that they could have more money to make the site better, to do more advertising, maybe to pay freelancers more, to just get more work in there, whatever the case may be. Again, more capital to make the site and the amount of work better. And one that I've seen that could also be considered a con is it could help them consolidate the space. So buy up smaller companies or do mergers or just outcompete other players. And the ultimate benefit to you from that is if those sites go away, then now those people come to Upwork. That means more clients on Upwork, more projects on Upwork, more potential revenue for you to make. So those are probably the three biggest pros that I've heard. The three biggest cons, I sort of mentioned this before, but a lot of times these things are accompanied by management or ownership changes, and that could lead to changes in how the site works, the terms of service, a whole host of things that could change as a result of this, and those could be for the better, they could be for the worse. You just really don't know. The other thing that I think is sort of an important one is it adds another sort of key stakeholder, which is the people, the investors that will buy the publicly traded stock. Now, there obviously are currently owners of the company and people who have stock, quote unquote, and so to speak. But this is when you make a publicly tradable, it adds a lot more of those people. And so now you have a lot more competing interests, a lot more voices, and that could lead to different things happening. Again, could be good, could be bad. And one that I think is worth pointing out because it relates sort of to the IPO that freelancer.com did back in 2013 is when you do these sort of things, a private company doesn't have to disclose its numbers. A publicly traded company does. And so when that happens, if the business isn't as good as people think it is, it doesn't meet the perception, the numbers don't meet the perception, that can actually hurt the company. And it seems like that's sort of what happened with freelancer.com because on its IPO, it opened at, I think it was $2.50 a share. It's now 5 years later down to 50 cents a share. And some of that people say has to do with the perception of how good it was doing, not matching the reality. So that's a potential con, which of course that would lead to less revenue for them, which means less they can do to make the site better and so forth. So those are some of the things that I've seen out there. What do I think will happen? Well, in situations like this, what I do is I tend to look at ultimately businesses like this they're made up of people. And so I think you have to start to look at the people and the sort of the key people that are involved with this and that are going to be key decision makers and sort of get a sense of where they're at to give you an idea of how this might look. And when I do that, I actually have, I think there's some reasons for optimism. So the big one here is the CEO, Stefan Kasriel. And the reason he's big is not just because of what he thinks and what he believes, but in order for him to get hired as the CEO of Upwork, it also sort of gives you some insight into the board of directors and the people who hired him and so forth. And I think when you start to look at that you'll see, again, some reasons for optimism. So one of the things that should give you, I think, some reason for optimism is he is not an outsider that came in as the CEO. A lot of times when you see that happen, an outside CEO comes in, is there for a little bit, and then an IPO happens. It's because that CEO was hired to get them prepped, and that's really can be a signal that it's really just a cash grab. He actually was hired to the global tech team first, so he managed that team of 300 product managers, designers, and engineers. He did that first, got hired for that first, and then he was promoted from within to CEO. So that's a pretty good sign that they didn't just go out and find someone to get them prepped for an IPO, and this is just a big cash grab. It may just be the IPO for them is the next logical step in them growing the business. Okay, and again, him being hired from within is a good sign of that. Another thing is that he is on the World Economic Forum's Council on the Future of Education and Work. So you may not know much about this council. I didn't either. But when you start to look at it, this council is really concerned with sort of the future of technology and how it's going to affect the economic environment. And they talk about this fourth industrial revolution. This sort of related to AI and robotics and sort of this impending doom of them taking all of our jobs and so forth. And they are trying to address some of those issues. And so him being on that council sort of, to me, is a sign that he's maybe more of a true believer that Upwork truly is a solution to the disruption that's going to happen as a result of AI and, robotics and just technology advancing in general. So that, again, I think that's a sign that he may be someone who's, again, a little bit more of a true believer, and this may not just be a complete cash grab. They may actually be doing this to get revenue to grow the business. He's also the head of PayPal Consumer Products, the head of PayPal Mobile Business, the managing director of PayPal France. So he has some experience working in these big companies and managing them and so forth. So that's also a good sign as well as someone who can sort of manage this process, this transition into this IPO. So that's sort of my take on this. I think when you start to look at that, it gives you a little, again, some reasons for optimism about this not just being a cash grab, and they might actually take that money and look to invest it into the company to make it better, to grow the business, and hopefully make it better for you as a freelancer. Of course, people can make they can make whatever decision they want, so you never really know. But I think the stuff that we can look at gives us some reason for optimism. So again, that's my take on it. Now, whenever I do videos like this, I always get people that'll come on here and comment and say I'm sort of a homer for Upwork or whatever. And honestly, I'm not really going to deny that, because Upwork, it really changed my life in a lot of ways because I had done, I think, what most web developers do, which was spend a lot of time learning all the technical skills and learning PHP and HTML and CSS and so forth. And I sort of had this idea in my head that if all I did was learn this stuff, that the work would eventually come to me, people would realize how good I was, and I would get work and I get hired. And ultimately, it was the tech skills that mattered. And when I finally decided to make that leap from just learning how to code to actually getting paid to do it, I found out very quickly that that's not the case. And one of the first experiences with that was over on Upwork. I put up my profile, and about the worst thing that could happen happened. I mean, it was a big deal for me to put my profile on there. It was difficult for me to get myself to the point to even put myself out there like that. And then, like I said, the worst thing that could happen happened, which is nothing. It was basically crickets. I got no invites, I'd bid on jobs, no response, nothing. And it was incredibly frustrating. It's hard for me to even put in words today, just like how mad that made me, because I'd spent so much time getting to that point. And I was just like, can one thing go right for me in my life? Can just one thing be easy? Does everything have to be hard? And so I was pretty frustrated for a while, but I did what I think any sort of aggressive or proactive person does, and I said, well, forget it, I'll just figure this out too. And I started doing a bunch of research. And one of the things that happened is I stumbled onto a series of blog posts, and this was back when Upwork was still Elance, and they actually had a series of blog posts where they talked about their algorithm and exactly how it worked and just broke it down in detail. Now, that's sort of like, when I think about it today, that's sort of like if Google just released all the details on its algorithm and how it worked. I mean, that's how big of a deal that would be today. But back then, these companies were still sort of getting their feet wet and still growing. And so nobody really noticed or talked about them or anything. But as soon as I read them, it became immediately obvious to me what I was doing wrong and why I wasn't getting any responses. Like, once you see how the algorithms work, it just becomes very, very obvious in my mind. So as soon as I read those blog posts, which, by the way, they've since deleted, obviously, because that would just be that would be a big deal if that was out there. But once I read those blog posts, I went back to my profile. I changed a few things, honestly, removed a few things that were now obvious that I needed to remove. And once I made those changes to my profile, it was almost immediately I got invited to my first job. It was like a $2,100 job, and finished that job. And I got invited to another one and another one and another one. And it just sort of started rolling from there. And once I was getting work and I was delivering on projects, I was getting good ratings, I was getting good reviews and so forth. It just sort of snowballed from there. And all the algorithms were started working in my favor. And I got to the point where I had to turn off my availability because I was getting invited to probably a good 15 to 20 jobs a day. And that actually starts to hurt you on Upwork if you don't respond to all of those. So I had to turn off my availability. But the point is that before I made those changes and after I made those changes, there was nothing different about me. There was nothing different about my experience. There was nothing different about Upwork. It was all the same. All that changed was I now knew what I had to do in order to appeal to those algorithms, to appeal to the clients over there, what to say, what to write, all of that. And it just made everything a heck of a lot easier, sort of turned everything in my favor, and I was able to get rolling from there. So a lot of people like to talk about how Upwork is the sham or the scam, or it's super difficult to get work or whatever. But once you understand, again, how those algorithms work and what clients are really looking for over there, it starts to become really, really easy to figure out what to say in order to appeal to both of those. So anyway, I created a course on all of this. It's called Freelancing on Upwork. You can learn more about it at upwork101.com. But in it, I teach you what I learned from those blog posts, how I changed my profile, and then beyond that into how to bid on jobs and so forth, how to write your proposals, etc., so that you can actually start getting work over on Upwork from day one instead of struggling like I did and getting disillusioned and all that sort of stuff. So if you want to learn that, again, you can head on over to Upwork101.com. Nice thing is you can get started for nothing over there. You'll see when you go to Upwork101.com, you'll see a big yellow button that says Start Your Skillshare 2-month free trial. All my courses are on Skillshare. As a teacher there, I can give you a 2-month free trial. So you click that big yellow button, that'll trigger the trial for you, and then you can sign up for that, take all my courses, including this one, during that 2-month time period, and then cancel any time before the 2 months is up, and you'll never pay a penny. So you got to learn this stuff without actually ever having to pay a dime for it. So it's a pretty good way to learn how to start getting work over on Upwork, which is the largest freelancing platform on the planet, without having to spend an arm and a leg to do it. So again, the link for that is Upwork101.com. All right, guys, I'll do it for this one. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time.